Will there be any ceasefire or humanitarian pause if the hostages are not released?
So first and foremost, I'm a head of state. I don't enjoy any executive powers. This is under all of this, including the war cabinet, is under the domain of the government, the emergency cabinet, the United Cabinet of National Unity under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu. They are discussing all of this, including with our friends and allies all throughout the world, who understand the tragedy, understand the challenge, and understand the ideas of how do we aim to get out of it. But we are not dealing with rational enemies. It's not an enemy that you have certain rules of the Geneva Convention. You're dealing with psychopaths. You're dealing with a psychopathic leader who has driven his people into the abyss. Unfortunately, it's extremely painful. Let me tell you, I care about Gazan children. I truly do. But with all due respect, first and foremost, I have to defend our people. We have to defend the Israeli nation. We've gone through atrocities. This war was coerced upon us. We did not want to go to war. We are not a warmongering nation. We're a peace-loving nation.
But you say that, Mr.
We
President.
extend our hands for peace again and again, and we get missiles on our head, and hypocritical comments by leaders from all around, or all sorts of figures from around the world who've never been here one day, never looked in the eyes of families who've gone through the worst of atrocities.
But let me throw this back at you, which is the comments of Amihai Eliyahu, a far-right minister in the Israeli government, who's just been suspended after suggesting Israel may use nuclear weapons against Gaza. That's one way, he said. That's an option. He also said there are no non-combatants in Gaza and the Palestinians should move to Ireland or the desert. Those are incredibly incendiary and inflammatory remarks. And if you're a Palestinian or if you're an Arab and you hear a member of Israel's government talking about nuking Gaza, then you think that there is a callous disregard for human life in Gaza, don't you?
So that's words of rubbish by someone who has no authority, no knowledge, and no involvement in the real decision-making process. It is very regrettable, and Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately denied it and took action towards this minister and called him now to a call where he's going to explain to him how wrong he is. It is absolutely absurd, and nobody really gives any importance to these words of rubbish.
Let's turn to some other words, which I don't think are rubbish, but are certainly worth mentioning to you. President Obama, the former American president, said the Israeli government's decision to cut off food, water and electricity to a captive civilian population threatens not only to worsen the growing humanitarian crisis, it could further harden Palestinian attitudes for generations, erode global support for Israel, play into the hands of Israel's enemies, and undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. And if you want to solve the problem, he says, then you have to take in the whole truth and you have to admit nobody's hands are clean. All of us are complicit to some degree. Do you agree with him?
So President Obama, I don't know when he wrote and made that statement, because there is a major supply of food, water and humanitarian aid to Gaza. It flows in. It has been increased dramatically. I met with Secretary of State Tony Blinken on Friday. He met with the Israeli cabinet. He discussed it, and there is a dramatic increase. I met with the Undersecretary of the United Nations in my office last week, and he thanked Israel for these enormous humanitarian steps forward. So I think the situation which we monitor on an hourly basis is much more reasonable than you depict it. And yes, I don't shy away from the pains and sufferings of many people, but at the end of it all, let's understand the situation. You cannot enable the Israeli nation, which is in shelters, to return to the same reality which was before the 7th of October. We cannot. First of all, people deserve to go back to their homes. Why would they go to their homes if they know their neighbors want to swallow them again with atrocious terror?
I agree with that, Mr. President.
And so the real issue here is that I think the international community needs to tell all the supporters of Hamas, all the Arab nations who express support for Hamas, or Arab leaders or other leaders, and tell them, you are to blame. You are to blame because you're enabling this evil regime to come back again, rather than removing the evil regime finally and enabling a rebuilding of a decent life for the Palestinian people.
But you talk about the fact that Israeli people want to go back to their homes, and of course they do. And absolutely their safety was removed from them. The depravity of October the 7th has caused huge trauma to not just people in Israel, but Jewish people around the world. I completely get that. But what do Gazan people do? Over 1 million have been displaced from their homes. If you could just explain to me, how do the Gazan people come back to their homes if they've all been obliterated in the north of Gaza?
They will be able to rebuild their homes like in the past. It's not the first time that they were under war, unfortunately. It's extremely tragic. But you don't give me an answer to how exactly am I going to live with the fact that in their homes, and they saw these missiles from their homes. They saw the terrorists coming out of their homes. They saw the tunnels dug in their homes. They saw their mosques being filled. They saw their hospitals. The hospitals which were financed by so many countries, including EU countries and other countries, become the center of command of this terror attack, this terrorist organization, meaning giving no hope to them, to their children and grandchildren. Hopefully, when this ends, these terrible circumstances end, these horrific circumstances end, we will be able to offer hope to the Palestinians in Gaza to go back, rebuild their homes, and finally have decent lives with a different regime that will enable progress and peace in the region like we all need to have.